All right, what's up, folks? Just jumping in here, just getting started. I'm going to go through and add some of our other folks over there on Facebook and on Twitter. All right. We got a fun show set up for you guys today. Give me 1 second. All right. See some people starting to jump in here. Oh, looks like we are live. We are up and active and ready to go. Welcome into the Falcons Podcast with me, Garrett Chapman, right here on Falcons on SI. And we are very pleased to, I got a great show coming up here for you today. Very excited to start bringing in some folks. I see some handful of people are starting to jump into the podcast. Welcome. What's up, everybody? See some people over there on YouTube. See a handful of people over there on Twitter and Facebook. Welcome, everybody. My name is Garrett Chapman, for anybody who wasn't familiar. Very excited to jump in here and have a pretty good show with you today. Make sure to give me a follow on Twitter at GChapATL. That's the best way to stay up to date on everything Falcons related. You can also head on over to si.com/NFL/Falcons. Got a lot of great content there, plus some roster moves that just got made official today. But we got a big show set up for you today because you smell that? It's game week. Yeah, the offseason's finally over. we finally get to talk about real football this week. It's week one. Today was the off day for the Atlanta Falcons, but that doesn't mean we don't have tons of content to get into. But we'll be right back up over there at practice tomorrow. So make sure to jump in and do everything else. So make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to follow along. But as of tonight, I've got my 3 big questions that still kind of circulate the team as of right now. If you have some and you want to drop them in, make sure to do that. But plus, we're also going to hear from Willie P, but a buddy of mine from up there in Charlotte, works at WFNZ in Charlotte, and he covers the Carolina Panthers. And so we'll do our whip around the NFC South. We'll do the same thing on Thursday. Hopefully we get something from the Saints. I'm still trying to work on something there. But no, we have something that I have planned for you on Thursday. We're going to hear from another interview in that spot. But thanks again for jumping in here. Dantes Jackson, I see you, man. Rise up. Good work you do. I appreciate you, Dantes. Mike Harvey says, who are you? Where is Scott? What's up, Mike? I work with Scott every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 o'clock. This is when I jump in here and I do a podcast. And at 8:30 in the morning on Mondays and Wednesdays, that's when you'll see Scott and Nick. So, Mike, pleasure to meet you, my friend. But we'll get into here just a little bit of that conversation that I had with Willie P. And I'm very excited to bring that to you. But as of right now, let's get into some lingering questions that still sit around the Atlanta Falcons as of right now, because I have 3 big ones. And if you have some, drop them into the comments below. We'll talk about it before we jump into our Panthers preview. The first big one, it has to start and end with what's going on at the right tackles position. I mean, we've talked a lot about it. Elijah Wilkinson is somebody who, let's just be real. I mean, he has 77 games of experience, 45 starts. But if we're being real, this is a guy who has bounced around. He's a journeyman player. He's not your first or your second option there at the right tackle position, but he does have 9 games of NFL experience, and you just need him to be a stopgap, and we've talked a lot about it on this podcast. I know we've written a lot about it over there on si.com/NFL/Falcons. Make sure to get all your Falcons news over there. But of those 45 starts that he has, 20 of those do come at right tackle. 2024, he was here in Atlanta. 2022, he was here in Atlanta, and he was all but named the starter by Raheem Morris on Monday. But that's not the big question. The big question here is, how does he line up against Hassan Reddick? Yeah, that Hassan Reddick, the guy who's 6th in the NFL going back to 2020 in terms of sacks. He's 51.5 sacks in that time, and that includes a year where he effectively sat out an entire season last year with the New York Jets. I mean, you can call him a malcontent if you want. I'll call him a dominant edge rusher. The guy was one of the very best in the NFL. He's on the wrong side of 30, but ultimately when you're that talented, it's going to be a very difficult spot, especially when you're going up against a guy who isn't your first option, your second option. And we'll see how he does as the third option. But Hassan Reddick's an all-pro. He is as good as it gets. He's one of the league's best. And, I mean, we'll see how it ends up going. I think you're going to have to start scheming some things open on that right side. And I mean, you got to stick a tight end there. You got to get a running back over there to chip. And more importantly than that, how is that rushing attack really going to look when the vast majority of your rushes go to the right side? Wilkinson should be enough to mostly hold water there on the right side, and that's really what you're just going to hope that he can do. You're going to have to scheme some things, and you're going to have to make things work. So Zach Robinson's got his work cut out for him, but doesn't get much easier next week either, because you got the Minnesota Vikings, and I mean it's it's a brutal start of the schedule there for Wilkinson and for the Falcons. So he's going to need to be called on to do a lot of big stuff. Shy Boogie says, what's going on, Falcons family over there on Facebook? What's up, my man? How are you, Shy Boogie? I'll give you a little shout out right there. What's up? What's up, Falcons family? August 809 says, would be interesting to see how Penix navigates the crazy blitzes Bowles is about to send. Yes, and that actually gets me into my next thing, August 809. Because you have Hassan Reddick and you have a pretty solid pass rush there for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You also have Todd Bowles, man. Todd Bowles is going to send some exotic blitzes. That's one thing that he is absolutely known to do. He just sort of has a reputation for that league wide. So it's going to be very interesting there. But that gets me into my second big point, which, again, if you guys have some points that you want to drop in here, if you want to discuss them before we get to our Carolina Panthers preview with Willie P, make sure to drop those in the comments so we can get to them. But the next big thing here is it comes down to the youth on this roster, the Falcons youth. They're going to be counting on a lot of young guys. And yes, that's Xavier Watts and Billy Bowman, two guys who are already announced as starters. But you're also going to get Jalen Walker and James Pierce very much involved into this team. They are going to be active, very active. All four of these rookies, especially when it comes in like stark contrast to what you saw from this rookie class last year, where all five rookies made the roster. Last year, you have a situation where these guys basically take a redshirt season. And when I say youth, and notice I didn't say rookies. I didn't say rookies because there were still a ton of young guys who don't have a lot of NFL experience, who you're going to be counting on to step up and play a pretty veteran-laden Bucs roster. This is a group of players there on Sunday that are going to have a lot of NFL experience. And you're counting on guys like Rukuroro. You're counting on guys like Brandon Dorlus. Zach Harrison's another young guy right there. But then Michael Penix. Of course, everybody's raved about what he's done at camp. As somebody who's watched him all summer long, I've absolutely been impressed with what I've seen. But fact remains, he's a young guy. And you have a tricky play caller up there in Todd Bowles. And, he's known for his exotic looks. And with the potential deficiency on his blind side, Tampa Bay is going to be throwing a lot at this young signal caller. So, you got to keep an eye on what that looks like. But on the defensive side of the ball, yes, this group has lost Tristan Wirfs, that group being the Tampa Bay offensive line, but this is still a pretty stout offensive line. And you got a Bucky Irving who is one of the breakout players of 2024. You have a new play caller over there in Tampa. So we'll see what it actually ends up looking like, but you're counting on guys who have no real starting experience at all with Dorlus and Ororo. They didn't really take snaps at all last year, and then look, just because they're inexperienced doesn't mean they're bad. I'm not trying to say that at all. I'm actually saying the opposite. I think that they're very talented players. We just haven't seen them yet, and you want to see how these guys react to in-game types of scenarios and other things that are going on there on the football field that are just going to evolve, and you just don't know what's going to happen on a week-to-week basis. Let's get into my third thing here. What are your looming questions about the Atlanta Falcons heading into week one? I put out an article about this. You can go check it out, si.com/NFL/Falcons. But the last big thing here is the status of Darnell Mooney. I know that's kind of loomed and kind of showered over this team here over the course of the summer, and it opened up roster spots as a result because David Sills got an opportunity to shine, and Casey Washington got an opportunity to shine. And I think you had a lot of guys who took advantage of those opportunities, but regular season's here. Now you need Darnell Mooney. Now you need your guy to step up and fulfill that role that he's got to come in here and do for Michael Penix, that's a guy who likes to throw the ball down the field. He really does. And who's your deep threat? Drake London's fine. Kyle Pitts is fine, but Darnell Mooney is the guy who's going to be the guy who he's going to be connecting with a lot down the field. And I will say that Raheem Morris did update the situation on Monday. He was going through individual drills and some jog throughs as recently as Monday, We'll see what he actually ends up doing on Wednesday. I'll be up there at Flowery Branch. But Raheem said he was day to day. That was the quote. And just a hopefully we'll see. I take that for what you will. I have confidence that he's going to play, but I doubt he's going to be anywhere close to 100%. But another person to keep an eye on is Ray McLeod. He was somebody who was a little banged up there at the end of camp, but we really haven't had a great opportunity to look at him all that much, just in the wake of, we didn't have a lot of availability last week. Let's just put it that way. But those are my big questions here about the Atlanta Falcons, about what this team looks like. Thanks so much to everybody who jumped in here. I do want to take a quick second, and I wanted to just say, hey, give us a follow at GChatPTL. Make sure to like and make sure to subscribe to the podcast. I see I got a couple people over there on YouTube, so make sure you're doing it over there as well. But I see a couple of people have dropped in there, some comments. We'll get to those here on the other side of this video. But look, I was very pleased to be joined by Willie P, doing a whip around the NFC South. Tampa preview is coming to you on Thursday, but I was pleased to be joined by Willie P from Charlotte. He covers the team. He does the post-game show, and he kind of gives you an insider's look about what you can expect from the division rival. So let's take a look and take a listen to what Willie P had to say. Pleased to be joined by Will Palaschuk of WFNZ, our friend up in Charlotte, North Carolina, WFNZ Carolina football post-game host, and you can follow him at Willie P Style on Twitter. Well, thanks so much, man. It's football's. It's been a long offseason. It's the longest offseason of any sport, it feels like, and it seems like it takes forever to get here. And then as soon as it gets here, it just seems like it comes out of a hurry. But how's your offseason treated you, and what are you looking forward to, man?
It's been good. It's been an intriguing offseason here in Carolina. I think there's a lot of brewing optimism based on the way things went last year at the end of the year. I think a lot of people were booed by the enthusiasm of the way Bryce Young looked in that second half of the season. And some of the moves that were made during the offseason definitely, I think, brought a lot of intrigue. The fact that he gets another weapon in Tedero McMillan and some fortification at some other positions. I do think the biggest thing for them is whether or not they can take that intermediate step. I think this has kind of been looked at for a lot of people as maybe the year before the year that they can get themselves back to contention, but it doesn't mean that, that they can't necessarily make an improvement upon a 5-win season a year ago. And I think that's the biggest intrigue from Carolina fans is just how much of that step did they take this year and then allow them to make an even bigger step potentially next year. So incredibly intriguing offseason, and we'll see what happens here when the games start counting for real here next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, you and I both know, this Panthers defense, it was at the bottom of the NFL last year. As a unit, it struggled. But what did they do this offseason to really invest in that and improve that unit?
Well, I think right away what you saw was that they needed to get somebody who was a puzzle piece, a chess piece that they can use to be one of those red circle guys on the defensive side of the football. And that's what they did with getting Trevon Mayrig, the big safety from the Raiders. And he's somebody who is going to be, the strong safety, but in name only. He can play safety. He can play nickel. He can be somebody close to the line of scrimmage. He can roam all around the place and be a big heavy hitter. And I think that's something you look at and say is a big, big thing that the Panthers needed, at least somebody else on that defense other than Derek Brown, who, by the way, missed most of last season. I think you can look at a lot of the defensive issues that the Panthers had and chalk them up to, not having that all-pro caliber player in the interior of that 3-4. So getting him back is definitely big. They completely reworked the pass rush unit. They released Davion Clowney, and they ended up getting, Patrick Jones. You get DJ Wanham for a full season. You use 2 high-level draft picks on Nick Scorton and Princely Umami-Ellen, 2 guys who come out of the SEC and are very, very much big parts of that. And then I think also they beefed up the interior alongside Derek Brown with Bobby Brown and Turk Wharton, 2 guys who stand to factor pretty greatly in terms of that. The problem areas, though, are the linebackers and I think elsewhere in the secondary. You do have, I think, what I would consider to be 3 corners who are very big starter-level corners, and J.C. Horn, Shaw Smith-Wade, and Mike Jackson. But beyond those 3, there's really a lot of question marks. There's a guy who really came on during camp in Corey Thornton, who's going to be that fourth corner. They did get a pretty sensational safety in Lathan Ransom, guy of the defending champion Buckeyes, but he's a little raw. And right now, Nick Scott is starting next to Trevon Mayrig. That spot, I think, is incredibly uncertain. And then at linebacker, the two inside linebackers are second-year guy and Trevin Wallace, who I think was maybe asked to do a lot more than they wanted to have him do last year, but somebody who I think stands to reason to be looking for a big jump. And then Christian Roseboom, who they got as a free agent from the Rams. So it is something where, they've got guys who I think are in the top 11 spots that are solid. It's just the depth is paper thin. We saw that throughout the preseason. I think that's part of why there's still this nervousness around, what exactly you project from the Carolina Panthers, because the biggest thing to get themselves forward is to turn that defense, which was woefully bad, into, I think the baseline expectation for people is get it to average. If it gets to average, then maybe you're looking at something that maybe is a better season than you had originally envisioned. But if it's still somewhat woeful, it makes things a lot harder for Bryce Young and that offense and the team as a whole to progress.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you look at the Atlanta Falcons are in very similar circumstances. I mean, you have a unit that finished 28th in DVOA. Panthers are right there. I think they were 31 or maybe 32 in that. But both of these teams are programs who want to get their unit up to maybe just top 20. And I think if you do that, then it seems like everything else just seems to open up. But let's go to this NFL draft too. You mentioned some of the draft picks you had there, but the big investment. I don't think it was all that surprising, but Tedero McMillan, you add him in the draft, and what has his camp been like? What do you see him doing as a rookie? But then on top of that, how does he mesh with Xavier Legette there on this offense?
Well, the weirdest part about the T-Mac pick was that I think a lot of people thought that Dave Canales and Dan Morgan were going to go defense, and so much so that they highly telegraphed their hand, so to speak, going into the NFL draft. They were telling anybody and everybody who would listen, hey, we're picking defense. And it turns out it was all a big smokescreen, because we come to find out that they were really very much in on T-Mac all along. I understood why they went that route. I wasn't necessarily sold on T-Mac as a player, because anytime I hear of a guy who fails to get separation, and while he failed to get separation, he caught a lot of balls without a lot of separation. But anytime I hear that from a player, that tells me that if they can't get separation in college, it's going to be very, very hard for them to do that as a pro. But he's come out and looked very, very dynamic at the start of his, again, very big infancy of NFL career. He had a very, very good start to camp. He was humbled a couple different times with going up right against J.C. Horn. So that was a great tutelage for him. I think he showed out, and also a couple of the joint practices as well. The Panthers had joint practices against the Cleveland Browns and the Houston Texans, and he was a very big part of those things. And I think he's done what you want to do. He provides that over-the-top speed, and he provides something that the Panthers just don't have necessarily in their wide receiving core, is somebody who can catch literally anything that's thrown his way, which is an incredible thing to do. And it's not just meshing with Xavier Legette, it's meshing with Jalen Coker, who now will have to step into that Adam Thielen role after Thielen's departure and be that slot guy, particularly on third down. This is a squad from a wide receiver perspective, Garrett, that we thought was going to be the toughest cut on the football team, and it ended up being so, to the point where a guy in Hunter Renfrow, who we thought was going to be a solid shoe-in lock to make the team, doesn't make it. And that's the part of it that I think comes back to how much they love this young core between T-Mac, between Xavier Legette, Jalen Coker, even the rookie Jimmy Horn Jr., who they expect to be a gadget piece and somebody who can be a big part of their return game, is somebody who really they like a lot. And right now, the only veteran piece in that mix is David Moore. Unless they do bring back Hunter Renfrow, as the time of this taping, we don't see Hunter Renfrow on the Panther roster. But from that perspective, it's a group with a lot to prove, but I think one that has a very, very high ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, look, Jimmy Horn was probably one of the undersung players on that Colorado team last year. I mean, look, everyone talked a lot about, you got Travis Hunter, Heisman Trophy winner, and Shedeur Sanders, of course, his dad's the coach, and Deion Sanders and everything else. But Jimmy Horn was one of those guys on that team who really made that team really click. I think he's an interesting one, kind of a gadget player. Xavier Legette, I mean, obviously a fantastic gadget player when he was at South Carolina. Didn't fully come all the way together in a way that I think a lot of people kind of hoped he would necessarily. But, year two is one of the biggest jumps for wide receivers in the NFL. It wouldn't be the craziest thing to assume that you see that. But, you talked about Hunter Renfrow. I was stunned by that cut. But at the same time, I was equally surprised by another move that you make, and you send Adam Thielen up to Minnesota. I mean, they had the social media post that I saw, which was awesome. I mean, of course, his kids grew up there and everything else. But this room feels like it's quickly become one of the things they're more excited about. We'll get into that running back room in here in just a second. But that wide receiver room does feel like they really do feel confident. But why send Thielen? I feel like you needed a veteran presence on that team. They're really going young here, aren't they?
They're very, very, very young, Garrett. And like I said, David Moore is the oldest guy there, and he's 30, and he's not what I would call, somebody who has the kind of bona fides that Thielen had. But
yeah,
Thielen had a very quiet camp, to be honest, Garrett. And I don't know if it was done necessarily by design to try and see what you can get out of the four young guys. Five, if you were going to loop Hunter Renfrow as part of that. Hunter is not necessarily a young guy, but he was at least somebody he was somebody who you was new to the system, new to the program. So that's why I kind of loop him in there as somebody who they wanted to get an extra look at. They knew what they were getting out of Thielen, so I think maybe that's part of the reason why we didn't see or hear a lot more from Thielen. But it did kind of look somewhat like, I don't want to say they were phasing him out, but it was a hey, if we need to live without Adam Thielen, how can we do that? Because if you remember, Thielen missed a heck of a lot of last season with injuries. And so that was a very big downturn from the Panther offense, not just combined with Bryce's play, but also when Thielen went off, you really didn't have a lot of people around outside of Liggett and Coker really to be able to make plays. And so it put a lot of attention on them. Liggett, as you mentioned, I think the season was somewhat uneven for him as a rookie. Drops were kind of the big narrative point for him, but he's had a very good camp, minus the moment he had in the Cleveland game where he ended up punching a Cleveland defensive back and getting ejected from the preseason game. Outside of that, he's been very, very good. I think you can put him in a variety of different positions. You can put him inside, you can put him outside. Same thing with Coker. I think that's the thing that the top three guys is that they're all interchangeable. Like you can put them all in different spots and move them around the field, and it's going to make defensive minds have to make a choice on who we're going to shade our coverage to. And while I think a lot of that at the beginning might go to T-Mac, it's going to make things even more open for a guy like a Liggett or a Coker, or even somebody like a Jimmy Horn Jr. who can come on and be that change of pace, that gadget piece. We had a guy here a couple of years ago with Laviska Shenault. I think he's a better version of something like that. Even somebody Amir Smith-Marset was here also in recent memory that they tried to do some gadget things with, but it didn't necessarily work out. I think Jimmy Horn is not just a gadget receiver. I think he is a receiver who can do gadgety type things. And so I think they all have a very nice individualized skill set. And T-Mac catches everything thrown his way. Coker has never dropped the ball in his NFL career. It's something you look at and say, this is a group now that, just a couple of years ago, looking back, was a woeful group. There was, you wondered where the plays were going to come from. We're not too far moved from people saying, the Panthers drafted Bryce Young, but who is he really going to throw to? He now has dudes he can throw to that he can count on. It's all there for them right now. The only big question is, what does the tight end spot look like? And I think that's something that is a significant level of intrigue. Tommy Tremble, who was a great blocking tight end, the catching part of his game is still something that is in the developmental stage. He missed most of training camp, being on the physically unable to perform list. He just got off right at the end of training camp. So we'll see, how much he's able to do week one. They're really high on the second-year pro, Tavion Sanders, although he did not have the best training camp to date. So we'll see whether or not he ends up making that jump in year two. It seemed like he kind of hit up a bit of a rookie wall, but that's the big question is can Coker cover up the loss of Thielen as that third down security blanket that was so instrumental in Bryce Young's first couple of seasons? Can it be Tremble? Can it be Jatavion Sanders? who fills that role, I think, is the kind of missing piece, an unanswered question going into week 1 against Jacksonville.
Well, it seems like the running back room in Carolina is just absolutely fascinating to me because from the outside, it looks like there isn't much of a plan, but there's a ton of talent there. And that part is undeniable. I mean, I don't think any team has invested more into the running back room just across the board than the Panthers have. You have a second-round pick in Jonathan Brooks. Chuba Hubbard just signs this massive extension. He has the 1,000-yard season. Then you go and add another one with ETN. What's the plan there? And then what is the overall thought behind this unit?
Well, Brooks isn't going to play this year. Tore his ACL last year, so he's not going to play this year. So I think that's part of the reason why you get Rico Dowdle as a stopgap, as somebody who can be a part of that running back rotation with Chuba Hubbard. And look, Chuba, that's the plan. Chuba's I think, top 10 running back in this league. He's somebody who you're going to be able to give the ball to 20 times a game without question, and he's going to be a downhill runner, a guy who's great with contact, and somebody who also has let the pass-catching part of his game sort of develop into it. It seemed like early in his career, his narrative, not too dissimilar to Xavier Leggett, was identified with drops, and he's somebody who literally before and after every practice is on the jugs machine. So he took that to heart. He's somebody who they developed in this program. Ironically enough, the pick that was made of him was made by former head coach Matt Rule's wife, Julie Rule, saying to both Matt Rule and Scott Fitterer, hey, that guy used to kill you when he was at Oklahoma State and you were at Baylor. You got to get that guy. And he's turned into a blossoming stud for the Panthers. I think Dowdle is a very nice guy who can change the pace of him, somebody who's going to come in with a point to prove. They kind of tried to do that with Miles Sanders last year, and Miles was a bit of a malcontent. And then ETN, similar to Jimmy Horn Jr., is just another change of pace back. He's somebody who's also a good catch the ball out of the backfield kind of guy and also can help you in the return game. Look, I think there's a very, very clear plan with those three. And I think it's something where, with Rico Dowdle, that basically is the insurance policy on Jonathan Brooks. If you can't get Jonathan Brooks to a level where you feel like he can actually contribute in the NFL level in 2026, you jettison him off and you keep Dowdle or you go and get another piece. But I think it just at least gives you that staying power and that stabilization of a running game that, look, Dave Canales said last year, I want to be a running football team. Mm-hmm. And while he said that, game situation didn't dictate that he ran it as much as I would have liked and a lot of the fan base would have liked. So I'm curious to see if Dave puts, his depth chart or play sheet where his mouth is and says, hey, you know what? We're actually going to run the football a heck of a lot more this year, because you hope the Panthers play a lot more closer games, particularly because of the offense playing more efficiently. And as we said before, with the defense hopefully elevating itself to a point where they're not having to force the offense to go drop the play calling and the game plan, so to speak, and just go hurry up, no huddle, and try to throw it every time.
So we are doing our trip around the NFC South. You can give him a follow at Willie P Style on Twitter. WFNZ Carolina football post-game host and WFNZ in Charlotte. Also does Charlotte FC. A little bit for any Atlanta United fans out there. I mean, we got our rivals up I-85. He does a lot of the play-by-play and everything else. He does a fantastic job with that. Well, we've been kind of beating around the bush here because I feel like the number one thing about this team that fascinates me heading into the season is the quarterback. I mean, you trade everything to move mountains to go up and get this guy. And his rookie year, I would say, in fairness, it was a bit of a failure. And then he gets benched week 3, and then he continues to, struggle. And then it's only because of a car accident that he actually makes his way into the starting lineup over Andy Dalton. What do you make of it? Because I guess by the end of the season, he started potentially from the outside. It looked like he was picking up a little bit. But what do you make of what he was doing down the stretch?
Well, I'll say this: he was not given the best runway to succeed, and there's been a lot written about what ended up happening with Frank Reich and the initial build of that. It became incredibly obvious that Frank and him did not see eye to eye. It was even obvious that Frank and Thomas Brown, the offensive coordinator, didn't see eye to eye. So he was not given the best opportunities to succeed as a rookie in Carolina, and I think that definitely curbed his ability to grow and curbed his ability to acclimate to the National Football League. Last year, throws an interception on the first play. Going back to what I said about Dave Canal saying, hey, we were going to run the football. On the first play from scrimmage, they call a pass play, and he throws an interception. He has a 2-interception game against New Orleans. They go out against the Chargers. He throws another interception, and it's not good. And he basically is benched, like you said, going into week 3. Comes back in relief against Chicago in a blowout contest, plays a little bit at the end against Washington as well, and then has to come in that Denver game after the car accident. And he did pretty well, but he really took that jump on the 3rd of November, the home game against New Orleans, where, he looked a lot more composed, and it just kept on getting better and better. And quite frankly, the best games he played, quite frankly, Garrett, were the games that they lost. The Kansas City game, he threw for 263 and a touchdown, and they lost because the defense couldn't get a stop against Kansas City down the stretch. They lost the game in Tampa in overtime because of Chuba Hubbard fumble. They lost the Philadelphia contest because Xavier Legette dropped what would have been a short touchdown on the 5-yard line. They lost to Dallas in a game that I would say, again, wasn't necessarily his best game, but still he played very, very well up until that point. They beat Arizona in overtime, and had a big final game against the Atlanta Falcons, as you may remember, in the overtime victory. The better moments for him after that game in Munich, going into, out of all that really kind of solidified, hey, this guy's got NFL traits. This guy has made that next step. You go into this offseason and you go into the way that he handled training camp. He looked very, very good in training camp. He looked like Bama Bryce. And the biggest reason why is because the off-schedule stuff has become so much more of a natural thing for him. He has the NFL clock down pat in his head. He's not running for his life like he was during the first season he was here. The offensive line is incredibly solidified around him. So he's got, 2 very, very sizable guards in Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis. I know that they might not have Ike Ekwonu week 1, but when Ike comes back after his appendicitis, if he doesn't play in week 1, he's somebody who's definitely taken the next step. And they just re-signed Taylor Moton, and they love what they have at center in Austin Corbett. And I think, too, you've got receivers around him now. So it's all in front of Bryce Young. Just now, whether or not he can extrapolate what we saw from basically November onward last year into an entire 17-game NFL season, that's the biggest question for him right now. And if he can do that, the Panthers have the quarterback of the future. And this is a very much make or break year for him and the franchise to figure out whether or not he is their guy.
Yeah, and look, I'd say that this season would pretty much effectively go as he goes. And you said it feels like they're building to 2026, but is this a season that they think that they can make the postseason? Like, if things go well, like, what are the expectations in Carolina?
I think if everything goes well, they can win 9 games. I would struggle to say 10 just based on the schedule. That would mean a significant jump. And I think it would mean a significant jump for the defense if they did that. I'm in that kind of 7-win, 8-win, 9-win range for me, which I think would be a significant step up. It's, it would be 2 to 3 to 4 wins more than they had a year ago. I think they would, if they got that to that win total, that means they're basically in the hunt all the way through and on the way all the way down to the playoffs, particularly if those wins come early. I think they have some opportunities in the schedule for them to win early. It's just a matter of whether or not they can handle the middle to late part of the schedule when things start getting particularly hairy. They got to go to Green Bay. There's a couple different trips on there that are somewhat harrowing. They get Buffalo at home, but Buffalo is Buffalo, so that's something that you look at and say is not one you would circle necessarily in the win column. But I think the biggest thing is that the more important thing for them than wins or losses is if at the end of the year you can look at their franchise and say, we can trust Bryce Young to win football games. That's the biggest thing that I think supersedes any win-loss total, is that if they can look at the end of the year and say, we have our quarterback and we have the offense built around him, that's a successful season for the Carolina Panthers. And then they can go in the offseason, continue the defensive rebuild, maybe fine-tune some pieces on offense, get a little bit younger, maybe at some positions like an offensive line, and then get yourself the ability to fully expect contention in 2026. I'm not saying they can't win a down NFC South, but it would take a lot of things breaking right for them. and also it would take an overachievement, what I would consider, in positions that I feel like a lot of people aren't necessarily rating very, very highly, and I think rightfully so.
Yeah, I think you and I are in agreement then. That's basically where I see Carolina 7, 8, 9 wins. 9 being if things really, really go well.
Sure.
Just that's where I stand on it. But I'm glad I'm not crazy. I'm glad I have somebody on the inside who I kind of share that opinion. But as someone, last one here for you, Will, and then I appreciate all the time you've given us. I really do. And all of our friends here at Falcons or the Atlanta Falcons podcast, or excuse me, the Falcons podcast. Willie P. Style, go give him a follow on Twitter. What is the outside perspective of just what the Falcons are like in Charlotte from what you're looking at from Charlotte looking down I-85? What do the Falcons look like?
Well, I think they look incredibly intriguing just based on the fact that I think there's a lot of question marks that are almost very, very similar. Like you've got questions about what's going on at quarterback. Obviously, the injuries that have taken place during the preseason, like Caleb McGarry, for example, like that's something you look at and say is a significant loss to the offensive line and something that is going to be a big part of how they go about organizing their season. You look about whether or not they have enough weapons around Penix beyond, Bijan Robinson and Pitts and obviously London and all those things that are going on around them. And obviously when you come down to it, they've tried to break down and rebuild that defense about 2 or 3 different times over the course of the last couple of years. And Raheem Morris has got a very, very tall task around him because you're in a situation right now where you have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers who are, I think, for a lot of people's perspective, the odds-on favorite to win the NFC South. But at the same point in time, I think people would be surprised if, somebody other than the Saints. People wouldn't be surprised, I should say, if anybody else other than the Buccaneers won the NFC South. So from that perspective, it's still a very wide open division in that realm. I don't think anybody's picking the Saints. I think the Saints are somewhat the bottom feeder, the bottom dweller. But I think there's a lot of open real estate, and I think the Falcons are a very, very big part of that. And I think they are very much a wild card based on the fact that I say wild card in the figurative aspect, not the literal aspect, because I do think that it's a definite open piece of real estate. Like everyone's kind of wondering, okay, who's second? Is it Carolina? Is it Atlanta? I don't think it'll be New Orleans, but I think there's definitely that sense of that there's open real estate to be somewhat grasped. And I think that's kind of where I look at Atlanta is that they're not a complete team by any sense of the imagination, but I think they are a team that definitely has some weapons and they have a lot of intrigue. It just comes down to whether or not, Raheem Morris can get out of the way, because I know that a lot of times there were some decisions that were made by Raheem during the year that didn't necessarily portend those that help the football team. So I think it's a very, very intriguing year for them. And I think these 2 games between Atlanta and Carolina could very well shape who is second in command in the NFC South, or potentially who wins it all if we see a bit of a fall back from grace from the Buccaneers.
Yeah, and look, we're going to have the early opportunity to figure all of that out when the Atlanta Falcons head up to Carolina. Should be a fantastic football game there. I mean, look, they split it basically every single year, so we'll see how it actually ends up coming out this year. Willie P, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you, Garrett.
All right. Yes. So that was a great opportunity for us to chat with Willie P, who works up there at WFNZ in Charlotte. Big thank you to him. Good buddy of mine. He does a fantastic job. So make sure to go give him a follow at Willie P Style on Twitter. And that's it for us here on this podcast. But look, we have another opportunity on Thursday. We're going to do our Bucks breakdown. So make sure to set a reminder every single Tuesday and Thursday. I'll be right here on your screens, man. So at 6 o'clock every single Tuesday and Thursday. So looking forward to seeing you all there because we have a game to break down. It's week 1 of the NFL. So right before Thursday night football kicks off, make sure you jump in. We can talk some Falcons with each other and kind of jump in here. I'll take your questions on Thursday and I'll jump into all of it if you want to discuss some things. Plus, I'll give you a chance to hear from our Tampa Bay insider. But reminder, Scott and Nick, they are going live at 8:30 on Wednesday. And if there's any content that you want to see on the channel between now and next week, make sure to hit me up on Twitter at GChapATL. That's the best way to do that. But real football's being played. So that's going to take precedence, and I'm very excited for that. But make sure to hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to stay up to date on everything that we got going on, or just head over to si.com/NFL/Falcons. You can get your Falcons fix there too. My name is Garrett Chapman for Falcons on SI on the Falcons Podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere. But I'll see you all very soon. Until next time, go Falcons.